Look what TJ Maxx dragged in.
The Devil Wears Prada 2 is now streaming on Disney Plus and Hulu.
We are digital, we are downloadable, we are streamable.
The fashion event of the year is certified fresh.
Pull yourself together, we have work to do.
Critics say it's smart and witty and the perfect sequel.
That's all.
Get runway ready for The Devil Wears Prada 2 on Disney Plus and Hulu. Rated PG-13.
Welcome to the Show Up Dad, where we explore fatherhood and share insights to support dads and being present for their families. I'm your host, David Mendonca. But before we start, I want to thank our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Tallman Equipment, your go-to source for quality tools and equipment in the power line industry. Visit Tallman Equipment to see their selection of tools. I also want to give a shout out to the Show Up Dad Foundation, dedicated to helping fathers become more engaged in their families through workshops and community support. To learn more about our mission, visit the showupdadfoundation.org. Well, today, guys, I'm honored to have Tanawa Downing. He is a national civil rights advocate and litigator. His relentless fight for freedom for every individual, especially those affected by systemic issues, reflects his dedication to creating a more just society. Welcome to our show, brother.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tanawa, let's go ahead and talk about what you've been up to lately. I know you're all over the place right now. So
Yeah. So I've been doing this litigation, very specific litigation, for about 9 years. And 9 years ago, I was on the other side. I was fighting for government. I was high up in national security. I did a lot of national security design work for mostly seaports and airports. But more or less, America had bought into this notion that we needed to protect government from the people as a result of the, events of September 11th. And, I've come to learn that national security is really code word for domestic terrorism. You don't protect the government from the people. You protect people from the government. The law is there for the people. That's our weapon. And so when I started to realize that the things that I believed in weren't real, that what we call good is out there arresting people that are innocent and locking them up in prison and stealing children from fit parents, that's not good. And if what we call good is actually committing evil, it can't be good. Because only evil is able to commit such an act. A good is incapable of that. So once I realized that I was on the wrong side, I quickly changed and decided that it was time to fight for the right people. God had changed my perspective. So now that's why I'm out here fighting on behalf of the people to correct the things that I had largely done in my ignorance over many years of fighting for national security. So, but my issue very, very specifically is that we cannot deny the correlation between the destruction of the familial unit and the trauma that we're inflicting upon children by the removal of them from within the family unit and this phenomenon that we call mass incarceration. Because for every child that you remove from love and care of their mother and father, statistically has an 85% likelihood of going to prison over their lifetime, because they lack the tools that they need to be able to live within a society that has certain parameters and parameter requirements. Mm-hmm. And so what we see is that as we break down the familial unit, we see mass incarceration ramp up. So, today, right now, as we speak, there's more than 12 million children that have been removed from the love and care of their family by state CPS systems. That's 12 million children that 10 million of them statistically are going to end up in prison over this next generation. And that is an unsustainable track, considering that right now today we have 2.9 million prisoners, and that puts us at 16 times more than the next closest industrial nation. So based upon the numbers alone, we could see in one single generation, this generation right here, we go from 16 times more prisoners than the next closest industrial nation to 58 times more. So we need to understand that as we break down and destroy the familial unit, as we create this trauma in these children by removing the examples of self that they need to become the person that God intended them to be, as we do that, we're seeing a massive increase in the prison population. And now we have a self-sustaining, reoccurring product that the state's actually benefiting from. And we need to bring this to people's attention and say, no, you're not going to get into our family. You're not going to dictate how we are to raise our children and how we're supposed to be. This is the plight that I'm on, and I'm honored that God chose me to help do this.
No, I thank you that God definitely changed your heart and got you on the right side, Tanawa, for sure. One of the things that kind of caught my attention is when you said you're doing it, in a wrong manner, right? Because in your ignorance. I have this tattoo on my arm. It's 1 Timothy 1, verses 1 through 13. It says, I was formerly a blasphemer, a persecutor, and a violent man, but I attained mercy because I did it ignorantly in unbelief. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about right there. That describes exactly your situation. You did it ignorantly and unbelief, but God is so gracious when he changed your heart to be able to fight the good fight and go forward and be an advocate for those who don't have a voice out there. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is you said about the system, right? And how it's benefiting. What are some of the examples that they're benefiting from as far as incarcerations and taking children away and stuff like that?
Yeah. So, a lot of people talk about the Title 4D,
Mhm.
that the states get. So for every child that you're moved from and placed into state custody, that state is going to get federal funding under the Title 4D Social Security Act. Now, the amount, it varies, but, it could be easily $1 million over the lifetime of that child. But a couple things have to happen. One, you have to remove the child and put them in state custody. And two, you have to keep them in state custody. So you don't give them back to the family or to fit family members, because that's not going to get the financial benefit that the state wants. Now, a lot of people talk about the 4D funding and they say, oh, this is the reason why, this is the driver. And one of the problems is that that's the short-term benefit. And yes, there is an actual tangible benefit that exists, financial benefit that exists for every child that the states remove from families and put into state custody. Now the state is going to get federal funding, $40,000, it's not 40,000 a month, I believe, but I don't want to say the exact amount, but it is significant, right? And we know that for every child, the state could be getting $1 million plus over the lifetime of that child being removed in their custody. So there is a financial benefit and a financial driver in doing so. But what we don't talk about is the long-term financial benefit, because again, for every child that you remove from the love and care of their mother and father, right, that child is going to grow up and become statistically a criminal. And that criminal is then going to go into a prison where they're going to continue to get federal funding dollars for the rest of that person's life. And, one of the things I like to say is that, we're so stuck on looking at what people do, right? But the problem is that when we look at what people do, all we see is a monster that needs to pay for things they've done. And it creates a vengeance-based system. That's the system that's been set up, is that we're looking at this adult and we're saying, look at what that adult did. But we fail to recognize 20 years before that adult did that adult was once a child who was removed by the system, taken from the love and care of their mother and father as an action of first business as opposed to last, like it should be. And then, that trauma is never healed. And now they're going to get punished for something that wasn't their fault. And so, when we look at the benefit, the financial driver behind this, there is an initial financial benefit, of course, with the Title 40 funding, with putting them into state custody. And now federal funding is going to be used to pay the state to keep that child in state custody, right, for the period of time that they're there. But then once that child becomes an adult, that's going to be an adult that doesn't know how to live within the parameters of our society. And so that adult is then going to become a criminal. And that criminal is then going to further benefit and incentivize financially the state, rather than, looking at the trauma of the individual and saying, you know what, this child had something happen to them that was tragic and it changed the trajectory of their life. And we want to heal that trauma so that they can, live within our society. The family dynamic is very, very interesting, because, and all of this information, you guys are welcome to look it up, right? Go to the DSM, to the desktop physician manual for psychiatry. You'll be able to see that the things I'm about to say makes sense. It's all, this is the way it works. So for a father gives his image to a son, right? His son learns how to be a man from his father. So when you remove the father from the household, that son, the male child, grows up and he doesn't know how to be a man, right? Because his image of self was taken away. And this is well known. So now you have a male child that grows up with a lack of sense of self, right? And he's got a great likelihood of committing suicide. He's going to have adjustment issues and so on. Now for the daughter, that daughter's first love is her father, right? She learns how to love from her father because he teaches her what a treasure she is. That's the role of the father for the female child. Absent the father, that female child grows up into a woman that doesn't have the ability to have long-lasting relationships because she doesn't know how to be loved because her first love, being her father, was removed from her life. So when you look at the dynamics within the family, the father is important because he gives his image to his son. Son learns how to be a man from that. Daughter learns her value, her treasure, how precious she is from her father. You remove that, and now you've got a woman that doesn't have the ability to have those relationships. The inverse can also be said about the mother, right? Mother gives her image to daughter. Daughter learns how to be a woman based upon mother. You remove mother from the house, right? From the family. Now that daughter grows up without a sense of self. And now she has adjustment issues. She doesn't know how to be a woman because the image of woman was taken from her, right? And now she's got a likelihood of going to prison over a lifetime. But for a mother, the son, his first love is his mother. He learns how to love from his mother. That's why a son will marry someone just like his mother, because the love that he gets is the love that he goes out and seeks within the world. Same thing with a daughter. A daughter will marry someone just like her father because she gets love from them. So my point here is that the dynamics of the family is extremely important for both a male child and a female child. And when you remove either one of those two, you see a massive, significant breakdown and fracturing of our culture, of the actual development of the child into adult. And now you see, the criminological issues that we're talking about with the long-term, adjustment issues, not being able to live within the parameters of society, because these are people that have lost their sense of self because the state has decided they knew better how to raise the family itself. And so we've got to step back here. We've got to say, brothers, all of you, we got to say, this is our family, and we're going to raise our family consistent with what God commands us to do. And you need to get out of our family because you don't have a role within the familial unit. God made me a husband. God made me a father, not you, state. Get out of my family and let me raise my children. Yeah.
No, that's so true. We see every single civilization that has broken down was because of that familial unit being eradicated. I think Carl Zimmerman wrote a great report in 1942 talking about the fall of the atomistic age. I did a report on this at the National Day of Prayer in 2020, or a speech actually. And he goes on and talks about how, all these great civilizations have fallen because of that, how women were losing their inclination to actually be a mother. We had the rise of feminine movements. We had all these different things that are coming against the family. And it seems like it's targeted against the family. We see that since the very beginning of time in the Garden of Eden. Yeah. The marriage, right, between Adam and Eve was attacked by the enemy. We call him the serpent or Satan, right? Well, if you look at the pictograph of what serpent is, it's actually a moving whisper. And that's exactly how these agendas are influenced into our culture. It's a whisper, it's a thought, it's a something through social media. I was reading the other day, Tanawa, that the algorithms now are pitting husband and wife against each other.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting, because how do you destroy a nation? How do you, even through our military great minds, you know what I mean? Yeah. They talk about divide and conquer, right? And that's exactly how the enemy is attacking our families. If you can get the family unit to fall and to fight each other, guess who is there? Yeah. Our children.
And remember, like the old saying, that a family can survive without a nation, but the nation cannot survive without the family. The family, I mean, what did God create at its basis, at the basic form? But the family, right? Woman and man with child, right? I mean, it's the family that God created. And so why would something anti-God want anything less than the destruction of the familial unit? When you look at these family courts, like I'll be honest with you, I don't deal with a whole lot of the family court stuff. This is something that my partner Jessica Saxton does. She likes dealing with the family. I'm absolutely fighting for the family, but I don't like to get involved in it because it is a nasty, culture, right? Because it is people, mostly man and woman, pitted against each other. And so there's so much conflict and chaos within family court issues that I just assume stay away from it, because prisoners are easy. I mean, you fight for prisoners, they will all align with one single action. They're so appreciative that there's someone out there that's fighting for them that they don't say a whole lot of negative, derogatory things about me. But once I stick my neck out in the family court, whole different ball game.
Yeah.
So I try not to do that much. But the thing is that when you look at even like the slavery institution, if you want to get compliance, if you want to get people to obey you, then the inconsequential side effect of enslavement would be the breakdown and fracturing of the family unit. That's what we did here in America in chattel slavery. We first removed the male from the household, and that put the children into a lower socioeconomic status, right? Made them dependent upon this system. And then the trauma was created by either removing the children completely, right? That fear that was inflicted upon them made them become more compliant to the enslavement that they were being placed into. This is a well-known byproduct or side effect from the chattel slavery that was not inconsequential. It was an intended action. And you're absolutely right. Like, all through history, the family's been attacked.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been attacked because the one thing that strengthens a society and gives us rooting and structure and stability is the family.
Yes.
You break the family apart, and now you have a man that's lost. You have a woman that's in a lower socioeconomic status. You have an intended two parts that were supposed to prop each other up and hold each other together, that is now faltered and falling apart. And then you find these children that are left as the byproduct without any sort of structure or guidance, brought into a system that is going to use the fear and everything else to push them in the direction that they want to go, make them compliant. And this is what history's done to the family as long as humanity's existed.
It's
As
crazy.
long as it's existed.
I see a lot of. I was talking to one of my good friends. He's going to be running for Virginia Council. He was an ex-CIA guy, served with him in the military and stuff like that. And one of the things he saw with terrorists, he said, was they recruited these guys who didn't have a father figure, right? And it's the same thing with gangs. I talked to George Christie, who's a Ventura president of the Hells Angels, and he talked about the same thing, that he was this father figure to a lot of these guys. He said everybody wants to feel like they belong.
Yeah.
He said they're all looking to feel like they want to belong. And when you break down that family unit, when you don't have a father or a mother, right, you're going to go looking. There's a longing inside of you that God has placed that you owe your children, right? We owe a debt to our children. And when that's not being met, guess what? Our children are going to search for it, usually starting in adolescence. They're going to start seeking for it in the world. And that's what we see a lot of times with these children that are becoming and going into gangs and all this other stuff like that. So,
yeah, I don't remember the exact statistic, but I want to say it's somewhere around 90% of people that are in prison grew up with a fatherless household, right? It's a huge number.
Yeah.
And either not just fatherless, but absent father. But regardless, these are men that have grown up without having that male figure to look up to. And another thing is like, we even saw a lot of this within our own history with the Native American culture, because we had the Native American culture that was here that our government didn't really like, right?
Yeah.
Wanted to remove them, from history. And so what do? They took the children and they put them into Christian schools, gave them Christian names. And in doing so, we've now got an entire culture within our society that has been forgotten and lost. I mean, entire languages that have been lost because these are children that grew up without an image of self, not knowing who they are, where they're from, or their heritage and culture. And now we have entire swaths of our own society and our own citizenry that's lost its own image of self, its own culture. And this is what government can do in its worst. And we need to be aware of it, because what makes America strong is not an institutionalized belief in one single structure politically or whatever. What makes America great is our ability to come together from all sides or all parts of the world with the best ideas, because we're not just a white citizenry or a black citizenry or an Indian citizen. We are, a melting pot of every culture from around the world with the best ideas. And if we can communicate and talk about, and debate issues, then we can be the most amazing country that this world has ever seen, because we have that ability to be able to come up with the best solutions if we're willing to listen to other points of views and actually engage in a reasonable debate so that we can, produce that good outcome. And we're not seeing that. And as we talk about the breakdown and fracturing of the family unit, a man is simply a product of his environment. A child is a product of the family environment. If I create an abusive environment with my wife and I, we will produce abusive children, because that children will be a product of the environment that we're in.
Yeah.
So here, a man is no different. And if our own leadership, right, our own, Congress, United States Congress, if they are infighting to the point that they can't even reasonably enter into a house without fighting with one another, then why would we expect that the people are going to learn anything different? We have a Congress that they can't even stand to be together with one another. And then we wonder why we have such infighting within the family unit itself, because what we're learning is that within that household, we don't have to communicate anymore.
Yeah.
And so, we wonder why there's so much chaos and conflict within the family court system, when the family court system is creating that chaos and conflict. Any issue can be resolved with communication. A man and a woman, if they were given the opportunity to be able to communicate and work through their problems, they could do it. I don't care how big those problems are. That's what communication was designed to be able to do, is resolve. So when you get attorneys that come in and say, no, you're not going to communicate, then we wonder why we have a breakdown, fracturing, destruction of the family unit. Because absent the ability to communicate, we have the inability to be able to resolve conflict.
No, I agree with that. And there's a lot of miscommunication there too between the lawyers. Say, for instance, you have a couple, right? They're in a domestic violence dispute or whatever. They can't talk to each other, right? Because
Right.
laws say they can't talk. Now they're actually having to go through their lawyers as a middleman to communicate with each other. I know growing up playing that game where you tell a story to somebody and it goes to the next person and the next person. By the time it gets to the original sender, right, the whole message is all misconstrued.
Absolutely.
So there's a breakdown there in that communication, and next thing you know, it's causing more and more infighting, because why? What you said isn't getting sent properly to the other side. And who benefits from that? The lawyer.
Right. And that's the real question is what is the intentions of the attorneys within the arbitration? Are they there to mitigate conflict? Are they there to bring these people back together and try to find common ground once again? Or are they there to get paid and to get paid as much as possible? And the more fighting that there is, the more they get paid. I mean, when we eliminate the ability for the people to communicate with one another, to resolve the conflict, and we put into place people whose intent is to get paid as much as possible, then they'll be surprised if we don't have conflict resolved. If we aren't able to come up with reasonable arbitration to the outcome of these disputes. I mean, once again, if we're able to communicate with one another, that will resolve any issue. I mean, we can resolve all issues through that communication. And I think that, especially when you look at family court, when you look at the children, the first act of our government should not be remove the child, right? The first act of our government should be, what can we do to help stabilize that child's environment, right? Because that child will be happy to live in a cardboard house as long as they're with their mother and father, right? So when the court gets involved and the very first action is, okay, let's remove the child and then require the parents to have to prove that they're fit to be parents and whatever else, that's not the way that things are supposed to work, right? We're not supposed to go to worst case scenario as the first action of the court. So, that kind of brings me to where I'm at. Like, so when I'm actually fighting, a lot of people have got me confused. People think that I'm fighting for prisoners, right? And that I want prisoners to get out of prison on technicalities, and that's not true, right? What I'm saying is that I'm actually pointing at the judiciary. And I'm saying, let's look at the behavior of the judiciary. But the way that I point out the behavior or show the typical behavior is through the criminal court. And the reason why that is because there's an old saying from St. Augustus Assisi. He said that how incredibly alike are all the tyrants, but how gloriously different are each of the saints. Every tyrant is going to be the same. because the tyrant is going to teach their followers to act the same way that they. And so once you identify the standard procedural situation that they do, or their typical behavior, then you could presume that all of them are going to have the same typical behavior because they're all being taught to act that way from the boss, from the top tyrant. Yeah. So in a criminal court, what I'm dealing with is the absence of an indictment by a grand jury. So today, right now, as we speak, there's more than 700,000 people that are currently in prison here in America that did not receive what is called an indictment by a grand jury prior to being held over for their crime, alleged crime, despite the fact that the Constitution of the United States of America explicitly states that you must have an indictment by a grand jury. So Clause 1 of Amendment 5. Now remember, the first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights. Those are the rights that were so important that they need to be called out and enumerated so that they will never be interfered with or considered as typical, legislative, that they can be removed.
Yeah.
So Clause 1 of Amendment 5, what it says that no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. So that's clear. You must have an indictment by a grand jury before arresting someone and holding them over for a capital or an infamous crime. We're not going to go into what those crimes are, but right now today, there's 13 states that do not conduct a grand jury, despite the fact that the Constitution says you can't hold someone over. A good example is the state of Washington. Mm-hmm. Article 1, Section 26 of the Washington State's inferior Constitution says no grand jury shall be drawn or summoned in any county. So we have a state that has an inferior state law that functions directly to the contrary of the United States Constitution. And now we have a supremacy issue. We need to determine, which law is going to be supreme. But what happens with the grand jury? The purpose of the grand jury is to protect the accused from hasty or malicious charges by an overzealous prosecutor or judge. It's a check on governmental power to make sure that there's a fair and neutral decision maker in place that's not attached to the body seeking the prosecution, right?
Yeah.
It is a 16 to 23 people that will review the state's case before anyone can even be ordered for arrest. Because the problem is that if there isn't that fair and neutral decision maker, then the judge, the prosecutor, law enforcement, CPS, they all work for the same entity. And that entity just so happens to be the moving party in a criminal matter, state of whatever versus you. There is no neutral, unbiased decision maker when it's the judge that makes the decision, whether or not to order an arrest. That order for arrest was supposed to come from what's called a grand jury. And then that grand jury would pass it off to a petit jury who you would then take them through their criminal proceedings to find them guilty. All right. So my point here is that the purpose of the grand jury is to protect the accused from hasty or malicious charges by an overzealous prosecutor. But what happens is that when you remove the grand jury, when you remove it, it sets up what is called an irrebuttable presumption of guilt. And an irrebuttable presumption of guilt is when you are presumed guilty based upon the mere fact of being accused of having committed a crime. So if the judge presumes that you're guilty based upon someone accusing you of having committed a crime, and now he's ordering your arrest and putting you into jail, you've never been found guilty of anything, you've never had the opportunity to confront the accusations against you, but yet your constitutional rights have been deprived, that is an irrebuttable presumption of guilt. Now, what happens in a criminal matter with an irrebuttable presumption of guilt is that the burden of proof shifts, right? No longer does the state have to go out and collect evidence to prove that you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, because that's the way it's supposed to work, right? We all know that the state is responsible for proving that you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, right? And that you can never be presumed guilty, right? Because you must be innocent until proven guilty. That is the burden of proof, but not with an irrebuttable presumption of guilt. If there is an irrebuttable presumption of guilt, the prosecutor no longer has to prove that you're guilty because you've already been presumed to be guilty because you've been arrested and so on. So this is a breakdown in due process when the system focuses on speed and efficiency as opposed to established procedures and processes of law. So my point here is that in a criminal matter, the breakdown of due process exists because that judge presumes that you're unfit because someone said that you committed a crime. And now you are having to go out and collect evidence to prove that you're innocent, which is the exact opposite of the way it's supposed to be. The defendant never, ever, ever has to prove that they're innocent, because the burden of proof must always reside on the state to prove that you're guilty. That's the way due process works. And I can show that breakdown today, absent the indictment by a grand jury. I can show it all day long. The judges are being taught to presume that you are guilty because a police officer said you committed a crime, right? And now your rights are being taken from you. The problem is that in family court, I don't have 400 years worth of empirical data, right? I can't go back to Magna Carta and say, here is the breakdown due process when the system believes that you're guilty based upon the accusation, that you're rebuttable presumption of guilt. I can do that based upon the criminal court, but when you walk into a family court, let me ask you here. When you walk into a family court and CPS comes forward with an accusation saying you're unfit to be a parent, does that judge automatically presume that you're unfit based upon the accusation of being unfit? Absolutely. It is the exact same breakdown due process, because the judiciary is being taught to act the exact same way. So if a criminal judge is being taught to presume that you're guilty based upon the accusation of you having committed a crime, and that is a breakdown due process, then the family court judge is presuming that you're unfit to be a parent based upon the accusation of being unfit. And now you have to go out and collect evidence to prove that you are fit to be a parent, because the judge has already presumed that you're unfit. If it's a breakdown due process for one judiciary officer to do it, it would be a breakdown for another judiciary officer to do it. But I can only show the breakdown due process from the criminal perspective. But once I show that there is a breakdown due process in the criminal court, that criminal court and that breakdown due process, I will be able to extrapolate and show it is the exact same breakdown due process that exists in the family court. So if the starting point is you must be presumed innocent until proven guilty, then the equal presumption must be you must be presumed fit to be a parent until the state proves that you're unfit. And that can't be the other way around. Can't be the other way.
I got a question for you, Tanner.
Yeah.
So we see all this and you broke it down beautifully, right? I know it's a lot, but there's a lot going on, right? A lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
What have you seen as far as what you just said now? Does it change when there's genders involved? So say, for instance, is that the same thing for a woman versus a man? Because I'm seeing there's a lot of inequality there when it comes to the family courts and stuff like that. You know, a man gets charged for domestic violence, right out the gates, even if he just broke a phone or whatever. He's going to jail, not going to get out. He's guilty, all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Now, vice versa. What if it was the woman who was doing that? Is the same process the same for a woman, or is it biased?
So there is some bias, and some of that bias is led by previous legislation, such as DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, where that was a Clinton era act that placed the presumption, favorable presumption onto wife from husband. So if there's an allegation, fair and equal allegation, one says this, one says the opposite, they were to always go with preference for the wife. But I don't believe that there's the same bias that's based upon sex as we saw in the 90s. I don't think it's near as bad as what people think. I think that really, because I see a lot of bias on both sides, like just a ton of it. But what I'm finding is that it tends to be the person that moves first, right, is typically who the court goes with. Now, likewise, whoever the abusive parent is almost always the parent that gets custody of children, and it's the non-abusive parent that's removed. And you know, since we're talking about God, you know, this is a great example. Those of you who are spiritual, you'll understand this. Those of you that aren't, I'd like to introduce a new concept to you that maybe will help you understand. So the last thing I ever said to the United States Supreme Court, the last motion that I ever wrote to them, this is back in 2019, because in 2019, I made the decision, why am I going to continue to ask criminals to stop committing crimes? They're criminals. I know they are. So, if I'm going to play with a scorpion, it stings me. I'm not going to blame scorpion for stinging me. So I'm not going to continue to go to the Supreme Court of the United States and ask them to stop committing crimes because I know that they're criminals. Nor am I going to continue to play by the rules of a system that doesn't adhere to their own rules. So I told the Supreme Court back then, I said, listen, next time you hear from me, I'll be walking in there with 500,000 criminal affidavits on behalf of victims that have had this happen to them. And you guys are going to have to make a decision because I'm not going to continue to play by your rules when you guys don't play by the same rules. But my point is that the last thing I ever said in the last motion ever submitted to the Supreme Court, I said this. I said, every single thing that I'm advocating is consistent with God's divine attributes. Release of prisoners, return of exiled captives, love in lieu of hate, compassion, not condemnation, forgiveness instead of vengeance, equity and not tyranny. I know what side I'm on. So ask yourself, if I fight for God and you fight against me, who is it that you are fighting for? Right?
Yeah.
So I know what God demands. I can open up Isaiah 10. I can see right there. Okay, God says release the prisoners. Okay, well, that's kind of scary, but he says do that. God says lighten the yoke of those that work for you. Okay, they're treating them like slaves, putting them into for-profit businesses for direct benefit of the state. Okay, now I know what God demands. I'm not asking for anything beyond that. I'm simply saying this is what God says we need to do. Let's give that a try, right?
Yeah.
So I know what side I'm on. I know who I'm fighting for. But if I know who I'm fighting for and they fight against me, I know who it is that they are fighting for. Remember, every single thing that this system advocates for is the opposite of what God demands. God says your sins are forgiven. They say, oh no, we're going to label you a felon the rest of your life. God says, lighten the yoke of those that work for you. There are slaves under the 13th Amendment. We could force them into involuntary servitude if we want. God says, bring them out in light. We're saying, no, we're going to put them in a dark cell. I mean, every single thing that this system advocates is the opposite of what God demands. So my point here is that I know what spirit resides inside of me. I know it because I know how I've changed. I know who I've become. And it's all the result of that book and what it taught me, right? The word and what God taught me. I know who I'm fighting for. So if they're fighting against me, I also know who they're fighting for. And so my point here is that every single judge today, right now, as we speak, every single one of them is committing perjury. Whether they know it or not, every single one of them is going against the supreme law of the land, right? And I've proven it. Like, this is what the Constitution says, and there isn't a single judge in the country that is enforcing, at a minimum, the indictment issue. Not one single judge out of the entire judiciary, all the way from the United States Supreme Court down, every single one of them has said, oh, we don't have to follow that because because the state does something different. That's not true. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, so we know that judges are all committing perjury. And the effect of perjury is that you're a liar. You're a deceiver, right?
Yeah. So
we know that these judges all have a deceptive spirit within them. A different spirit for me. I got a spirit of truth. I know what spirit resides within inside of me. Mm-hmm. I know what spirit resides within that judge who's fighting against me. So my point is that when I walk into a courtroom and there's two people, one's telling the truth, the other one's a liar, right? The other one's abusive. And one's loving and caring for the children and love the spouse enough that they don't want to see harm done to the spouse, but there isn't equal, reciprocation there. One spouse is a narcissist and is attacking the other one. So that judge has a spirit that's not the truth, deceived spirit. And that judge is going to side with the spirit that makes them most comfortable, whether they know it or not. And so that's why I think that in most of these cases, why we're seeing these children go back with the abusive parent, or why we're seeing innocent people being locked up in prison, is because that judge is siding with the spirit that makes them most comfortable. And unfortunately for them, that's a deceptive spirit. That's an abusive spirit. And so these judges, they need to understand that if you guys, for all of you, if a judge is coming against you, right, and you're in a position right now where you are literally fighting against a judge who's come against you, who's come against your family, I'm going to say to you, welcome to the family, because you're on the right side. Because I know what side I'm on, and therefore I know what side they're on. And if you're on the side that they're attacking, you're on the right side, right? You're on the right side. It may not seem like it just yet, but I'm telling you, you're on the right side, because we know that all the judges are on the wrong side as of this moment. So I think it breaks down to a spiritual level. When two people walk in that courtroom, that judge is not going to side with you because you're telling the truth. You love your children. You love your spouse, or your ex-spouse. You don't want harm done to them because that's where love comes from, right? And so as a result, that judge doesn't feel comfortable with you. Doesn't feel comfortable with you because that's a spirit that's contrary to theirs, and that judge is going to side with the spirit that makes them most comfortable. And that's also the reason why in these criminal matters, that judge doesn't want a jury to be impaneled. They don't want the jury to make the decision because they're afraid that the jury is going to let the wrong person go, even though the wrong person is the one that judge is now forcing into a plea bargain and sending off to prison, despite the fact that that person didn't commit a crime and is being threatened, intimidated, coerced, or dressed into a conviction of guilt through an abuse of power by the judge and prosecutor. This is what happens every single day within this judiciary. And this is the truth that I want to bring forward to the American people. I want the people to understand, once again, that what we believe in, it isn't real, you guys. Justice is a compromise between two sides, because justice is equally concerned about both the accuser and the accused. Justice is an act of healing, right? It's repair. It's dealing with trauma. It is not one party prevailing over another and then making one person pay for things they've done. Justice has nothing to do with debt. It has nothing to do with paying for the things you've done. And justice is about healing. It's about forgiveness. And we've got to get away from this concept that justice is about paying for something that you've done, because paying indicates a debt. And this is not a debt-based system. It has nothing to do with money. It has to do with what's right and what's wrong. And sometimes, many times, what's right is not going to be in the best financial interests of the state. So what we believe in, you guys, it isn't real. But I think that it can be. But it's going to depend on what we believe in as the people of the United States. Do we believe in the one thing that makes America, America? Do we believe in its power, its supremacy, its authority? That Constitution of the United States of America is the only thing that makes America, America. And so when we look at what we believe in as a people, do we believe in that Constitution? Do we believe in its supremacy and its power? Or do we believe in the words that judge says to believe? Do we believe in the words that the state of New Mexico says? Or do we believe in the words that created this nation? I think that we need to have a real evaluation of what the American faith is, and we need to return to that faith and give it a chance to succeed. Because if not, then what we're going to find is that we have 50 sovereign states with nothing governing that relationship together, because that was the purpose of that Constitution for the United States of America.
Man, Tanawa, it seems that there's a lot. I thought it was interesting that you talked about judges in the same spirit and recognizing that spirit, and that's how they side, right? The Bible says something about that. It says that flesh doesn't understand spirit, and spirit will not understand flesh. And I think that's a perfect example, right? Yeah. That judge is not walking in alignment with you. He doesn't have the same spirit. He's attracted to the spirit of the person who is lying, the deceiver, the one that's deceived, right? Yeah. And they're going to align with that. So, like you said, if you find yourself in that situation and they're coming against you, praise God, because guess what? If God be for you, who can be against you?
Yeah. Welcome to the family.
Yeah, welcome to the family. I like that.
I know that doesn't bring comfort to those of you who may be facing criminal charges or who may be facing termination of parental rights. But I'm telling you right now, if this judiciary has come against you, if they are attacking you, then you are on the right side. Keep your chin up, keep the faith, and together we can accomplish something amazing. Because yeah, you're right. If God is for us, who could be against us? This system has no power once the people realize that the power is inherent to us. 40,000 judges controlling the lives and sustenance of 330 million people. What are those 40,000 judges going to do when 330 million people wake up and say, are you serious? You are destroying the one thing that created this country, the one thing that gives us our lives and our sustenance, that we look up to, that Constitution. You're destroying that in order to profit off of your illegal acts, judges, prosecutors. you guys are going to need to take a real hard look at your current situation and understand that the power is inherent to the people. And the message that I have for the people, if it gets out there, you guys are going to be in a very bad situation. And all I'm asking from you is to please just return to the established rule of law, work with me to fix this problem, because if not, you're going to be facing the people. And that's a far bigger problem than me. You know that. So, what I'm doing right now is I'm going around the country and I'm putting these public officials on notice. Tomorrow morning, I'm here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This is a city with a population of 560,000 people. Many of those people have no idea that their constitutional rights can be abridged at any moment, that they can go from a normal, life to an arbitrary, capricious allegation of a crime by any public official and could be arrested and lose everything, including their children, their job, their career, and even their own character and fame. This can happen to anybody at any point in time. And the majority of people here in the city of Albuquerque, this area, they don't even know that they need someone to speak up on behalf of them for their rights. That's what we're doing tomorrow. So I'm going into the Albuquerque City Council because I've already been through and I've served 48 or 47 states attorney generals with notices letting them know that their prosecuting attorneys and law enforcement are acting contrary to the Constitution of the United States of America, and asking those attorney generals to please correct those unlawful acts. Those attorney generals, including the one here in New Mexico, chose to ignore the issue and abstain from it and continue to permit those unconstitutional acts to continue. So then I went back and I served 47 state Supreme Courts, the justices, the highest judicial officer, letting them know that their judges are engaged in criminal behavior when they're relying upon a prosecutor or judge who is abusing their power, by relying upon an inferior state statute that allows them to abridge their obligations codified in the Constitution. So I went to them, the judges across this country, 47 state Supreme Courts, and asked them to please correct the unlawful acts of their judges. And they chose to ignore the issue and abstain from the issue. And so now I had to find a way to force the legislative branch to take action, because today, the issue is a police officer is relying upon a state of New Mexico law that permits them to charge by information, not indictment, in violation of the Constitution of the United States, and that is an unconstitutional act. That's an unconstitutional law. And when that officer does do that, that means that their actions is unconstitutional because it derives from an unconstitutional law. And so then when they bring it to a judge and say, Judge, I'd like you to hold this person over, that judge has to make sure that the power they exercise is consistent with their authority. If they choose to exercise their power because the law enforcement prosecutor abused their power, relying upon an inferior state statute that allows them to abridge their constitutional obligations, that judge is also, now engaged in that unconstitutional act. So that's the scenario. We have this conspiracy to deprive of rights, that it is happening because the state created a law that permits them to break the Constitution. But then the legislative branch says, well, yeah, but we don't want to get involved in that because that's too big of a deal. Remember, the prosecutor and law enforcement is executive branch, right? Executive branch. Judges is judicial branch. Legislative would be, senators, congressmen, and so on. But if the senators and congressmen hear about this issue, they say, oh, that's a big deal. We don't want to get involved. That's too big of a deal. We don't want to be a part of that. And so they also abstain. So I had to find a way to force the legislative branch to get involved in this. And we did that from what's called an emolument violation. So you can never pay someone to break the Constitution. That in and of itself is a crime. It's called an emolument violation. If you pay someone to break the law, that would be a crime. So what we're doing now is I'm going to city councils and county commissioners because they are the lowest level of the legislative branch, right? And what they do is, like here in the city of Albuquerque, the city council, they pay and formulate the budget for law enforcement. So if law enforcement are committing unconstitutional acts in the course of their business, the city council of Albuquerque is paying for those unconstitutional acts to occur. So we're going to city council meetings, public hearings, such as tomorrow morning, and we're putting it directly on the record, letting them know this is the constitutional requirements. This is what the state's doing. You are paying for that to be done. And now we're asking you to either, one, direct those agents to act in a constitutional manner consistent with their obligations, or 2, you are now knowingly and willingly engaged in criminal behavior and committed crime because we put you on notice. And so this is the way that we force the legislative branch to actually get involved, create the oversight that we need to direct the other 2 branches of government to figure out, who the problem is, and fix that problem. Because once you inform a public official that they're committing crimes, right, or that crimes are being committed, that public official has a duty and a responsibility to take action. Because when it comes to laws of criminal conspiracy for public officials, what that states is that any person who, having knowledge of any of the wrongs conspired to be done and who have the power to prevent or aid in the prevention of the commission of the same, neglects or refuses to do so, may be joined as defendants in the action. So when we go into a public hearing with the city of Albuquerque and the county or the city commissioners, and we notify them of these criminal acts that are being committed, they now have an obligation to report that and deal with that. And if they don't, they become complicit in it, and it can now be joined as defendants in the criminal action. This is the way to force them to actually get involved in something that they don't want to get involved in. And I can understand. It is a difficult decision because they're going to have to decide whether they're going to follow the Constitution of the United States of America or a New Mexico state statute, an inferior state law. The object to which their fidelity is bound based upon their oath or affirmation is the Constitution of the United States. So we want to try to entice them in the right direction and let them know that when you swear that you will do something, you best do it, because if you don't, well, even scripture says you've already been judged, So if you're going to swear that you're going to be a good public steward and obey the limitations of power that the people have given to you, and that's the oath that you took, and then you refuse to do so, well, that's not going to look good for you, City of Albuquerque. It's not going to look good for you, state representatives. So we're almost done with serving the city councils and county commissioners. I had a total of 55 of them that I plan on doing, and we're at, I believe, 48 right now. So we got about another week and a half. We're on our way from here. We're on our way to Florida, but we have now picked up I think the top 4 largest counties in America, which that alone is somewhere around 35 million people we've advocated for just in those services alone. But I think that when we finish, so when we finish 24 hours from tomorrow, because over the next day and a half, we're actually serving on behalf of 1.7 million people, because again, right now there's 560,000 people here in the city of Albuquerque. Once we notify the city council of these crimes being committed, we've now spoken on behalf of every single person within this area. And so what we're trying to do is we've got to get to the magic number of more than 50% of our society advocated for on behalf of this legal issue. That's, roughly 150 million people. And we're getting very, very close to that now. And so once we reach that point, we'll return to the United States Supreme Court again and ask the court if they're ready to hear this case yet. And my faith tells me that they will be finally. So after all the service we've done, 47 state attorney generals, 47 state Supreme Courts, 55 city councils, and 55 county commissioners. We'll be moving into state houses if necessary. But the next step is we'll return to the United States Supreme Court and see if they're ready to stop ignoring this and finally hear this case.
Man, Tanawa, man, you have done so much, man. You have really got the fire of the Lord inside you, just helping you advocate for the people that don't have a voice. We appreciate you coming on here. I just want to give you the opportunity now just to tell our listeners how they can support you on this great, amazing cause that you're fighting for.
Yeah. Well, so, 9 years ago when I realized I was on the other side, I was not a good father. I was not doing the right things. I wasn't setting the right example for my son. I wasn't showing the right love to my daughters. I was not being a good husband or father. Right. And so when I realized that, I knew that I needed to go out and I needed to become the person that God needed me to be, because if my son's going to look up to me as his hero, if he's going to look up to me as an example for what a man should be, then I better be the type of man that I would be proud of for him. Right. So I'm trying to set that example for my son so that when the questions are asked, when he's faced with a situation, he's going to have an example of, this is what you do, son, as a man, right? You're going to fight, even if it doesn't make any sense, even if it hurts you, right? You're going to go out there and you're going to do what's right because people need help. And that's what a man does. For my daughters, if they're going to marry someone like me, then I better be the type of man that I would approve for them. And so I'm out here trying to be that example for them. I love my children so much, but I had to make a decision that in order for me to be that person, I needed to go and be by example.
Yeah.
And so 9 years ago, when I decided to do this, I decided I was going to do it whether I had money or not. I've done this without being paid. I won't take a contract. I will fight for everyone, but I won't fight for anyone because I spent, the majority of my life making a lot of money, $800,000 a year. But the measure of my man, who I was as a man, was based upon things I had. It was a terrible way to live. And so, God just took it all away and taught me something, much more powerful, and that's character. And so we operate on donation only, right? And I think that the big reason why I do that is because I don't ever want to focus on money ever again. I don't want to be out here having that be my passion or my driver. I don't want to be doing things because of the money that I'm paid to do. I want to be doing things because I love doing it, because I care about it, and because I want to provide the best service possible. And I know that if I do that for the people and for all of you, and you like the service, that you're going to make sure that I have the things I need to be successful. And you guys have done an amazing, phenomenal job doing that. I've never been without, even in 9 years. I don't live, luxuriously, but we have the things that we need. But I want to say thank you guys so much for all the support that you guys have given to us. If you want to continue to support, again, we operate on donation only. And the reason why is because I need to be able to do what God asked me to do and not have any constraints whatsoever. I can't have anything hanging over my head saying, I got to go this way because I'm led by him, and I won't allow anything else to be leading me. So every single day I wake up and I find, what can I do today that's going to help, accomplish this outcome? And if you guys believe in the things I'm saying, if it resonates with you, if it fills your spirit, then I would welcome you to help get behind this and help push this across the finish line, because we're very, very, very close to that. And it's been a real honor to be able to do this and to be able to serve all of you. So thank you so much.
All right, we'll put it on the show notes too, how they can give to your cause, brother.
Yeah.
And once again, thank you for coming on here. Thank you for coming out here and visiting me, brother. You are fighting the good fight, and we appreciate everything you're doing for us. You are being that voice, like I said before, and may God continue to bless you on your endeavors, brother.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. God bless.